Hello. So in this video, I wanted to try to attempt, if this is at all possible for me, to simplify some of these questions around exploring our sexuality, what sexuality you identify with. And the course of putting these videos together has just brought home to me how complex this can be. So here's an attempt to try and simplify things if I can. Do bear with me. There is a diagram related to this that I put together. I don't know if you call it an infograph or an infogram. My first attempt, I think, is in one of those, which you can download. I've put the link for the PDF to download in the description for this video. It might actually be a good thing to do that. I'm not sure if it will display on your screen or if you will have the document, the PDF file, automatically downloading to your device. Now, I should say that I'm not pretending here to give a complete picture, and some of what I've got may be open to debate or may indeed be slightly wrong, or indeed very wrong. It's the sort of thing where I've just done my best, really. But the point here is to try and point out the sorts of different questions you might want to explore. And I've kind of grouped these really into four main areas. Firstly, there's the idea of kind of yes or no. It's either this or it's that type responses, what I've called binary decisions, binary choices. Secondly, there are the so-called spectrums, particularly relating to different aspects of gender. And even here, whether or not they're really all spectrums is an open question. There's something of a middle ground where perhaps either some people might see there's a break in the spectrum, or it might be the point where pure bright light shines through, or something else happens. So people that identify as being neutral, for example, might not identify with the spectrum at all, but if they're going to, this might be where we would put them, as it were, or they might put themselves, more to the point. And of course, with the spectrum, how you define what is, for example, ultra feminine, ultra masculine, is very much going to be a personal choice. It's not something where there's a universal agreement going to be possible. Third category I have called multiple choices. So here, there may be a number of different options that you relate to and the different criteria, as it were, that we'll consider. And indeed, you may identify with more than one. And as is the case with virtually everything here, you may flex from time to time. That may be something that comes and goes in the short term, or it may be that you flex over the longer term, or certainly feel different levels of intensity towards. And finally, a group that I've called just unknowns, and also, what have I called it? Unknowns and optionals. So here there are some things that we may not know that are actually either because they've not been discovered yet or because we do not have a view of our inside biology necessarily. And also some optionals. So if, like me, you have a faith belief, or you're open to the idea of something spiritual going on, or ideas around the anima and the animus, the behavior of the psyche, then some things here may be relevant for you to consider and relate to. All of this is very much a personal picture that you're building, really. So relate to what resonates with you and describe it using whatever words you want. These are really just prompts and ideas to just try and get at this idea of how complex this thing is, and perhaps help you, if you're watching this, to come to terms with your sexuality. As I say, I use the word sexuality very broadly here as well, covering gender, which doesn't necessarily mean presenting, wanting to be sexually attractive or with sex as an objective. I embrace the spiritual here, and indeed some social aspects as well. So a very, very broad definition here. So let's have a quick look at this diagram at each of the four categories. I'll just not go through this in great detail because hopefully most of it will be fairly self-explanatory, but really to give an impression of what's here. Firstly, this category binaries. So this is, as you can see, just identifying a number of different categories. What is your subconscious sex, for example? This is something I've covered in other videos. Itself, perhaps, a controversial theory. What are your social preferences? So it may be you were raised as a boy, but actually felt that you'd rather be playing with dolls' houses and so on. Can be different to the way you were socialized. As I say, is gender identity and indeed the way you like to present yourself in terms of gender expression fluid, something that comes and goes, changes? It is very much in my case. And separate from that is your, if you have body dysphoria, as I do, is that also fluid? Are there some times when you feel very strongly you want to be embodying in a male body or in a female body or somewhere in between? As for spectrums, I've identified 4 here. There's always going to be some overlap here, and it's true that even on one of these individual spectrums, there will be some overlap depending on which way you relate to them. So, for example, an example is the identity, gender identity spectrum here, where I put cross-dresser somewhere towards the middle, for want of a better place to put it on the spectrum. But that as a term can apply to, depending on your how you see yourself as a trans woman, for example. Would you see yourself still cross-dressing? Probably most wouldn't identify most strongly with that term, but from some perspective of some, it's possible you would see, yes, I'm trans woman, but I'm also a cross-dresser. This middle ground, which is interesting, as I say, where perhaps there isn't a definite crossing point, a definite threshold, although you may feel that something can be precisely defined in that way. So very much a personal judgment on that. Physicality, here I'm talking about the degree to which individuals have undergone a degree of either feminization or masculization in order to appear according to their preferred gender. And this can include both those who are pre-transition and those that have fully completed sexual reassignment. Different aspects of expression, presentation, how we dress, and so on, and behavior, mannerisms, and how we like to behave in society. And again, what is masculine, what is feminine, there is very much a personal judgment. I have identified pretty much at either end of the spectrum the binary group, here with the letter B. And people in this category are not going to have dysphoria, body dysphoria or gender dysphoria. They're going to feel very comfortable with the body and the gender they were assigned at birth, and perhaps not see themselves on a spectrum at all, but in a dichotomy, there is either male or female. And especially those for whom this is primarily biologically determined. As I say, this isn't about forming judgments. It's very much offering, hopefully, something where you can make up your own mind on these sorts of questions. Then I've come on to various other aspects, which I think are worth considering, where there's possibly a multiple choice. So more than this or that, there may be several options. And indeed, with some of these, you may identify with more than one. So some of the more obvious ones here: sexual orientation, the physicality you have at birth, how strongly you feel your sex drive is. But I've also put things here like your admiration of beauty, male beauty, female beauty, and other types of beauty, which may not necessarily lead to sexual arousal or have a sexual connotation at all. It's possible to be asexual and have a great admiration of human beauty, for example. So distinguishing that from attraction that does lead to sexual arousal. And also I've distinguished here sensual preferences. So, for example, I like the male touch, but I do not like the idea of being in an intimate gay relationship with a man, generally speaking. There are times when I have, but that's generally not my preference. But certainly I do like the male touch. So it doesn't arouse a sexual interest for me, but it's something that feels very pleasurable. Similarly with lifestyle preferences, associations. So I spend pretty much a lot of my time in different types of groups. There's quite a lot of the company I'm with is with women actually, and I really enjoy that and enjoy, I guess, the dynamic that's going to vary between the group, of course, but not talking about football all the time, let's say. Personae. I, on my channel, have described the way that I have both my male um, personality, Clive, that needs expression, has its own distinct nature. And I actually have two separate femme identities, one of which seems to be very authentic and rooted and grounded. And the other is actually something I seem to have created. But in creating it, not exactly just for play acting, but it's something that I've used to explore aspects of myself and to give expression to this inner sub-personality. This is the character of Anya. So it's taken on a personality of its own. But I do feel that I kind of curate what Anya does and where she goes and so on. So I've put that under the heading created. Some people would see that's not an aspect we should be considering, but I personally think it is. How connected are you to your whole body or parts of your body? So are there times, for example, when you feel very embodied by being aware of having breasts, for example? What about your genitalia? And again, this may vary from time to time. Physical traits may play into this, how you walk, how you speak, your tone of voice, and your consciousness of your body image, your self-image. One I think is important for me is the pronoun preference, which again varies depending on my persona. It seems to speak very directly to me when I'm being addressed as I want to be addressed. Peak sexual motivation, that's something I've covered in another video, which is very interesting, I think, to explore. And there will be some for whom there are fetishes and or recreational activity. I've included cross-dressing as a recreational, so that may often not lead to any kind of sexual arousal. Of course, it may in the case of transvestic fetishism, but it may not, as I say. So there may be things there you relate to, and a general felt sense of yourself. So this is when you're walking down the street, very often, how do I feel? Do I have a sense of being a man or a woman, or does it not really cross my mind very often? I don't have a great sense around it. Finally, then, some of these unknowns and optionals, as I've described them, which you might want to ponder as well. So as I say, I don't know how comprehensive this is. I don't know if there's errors in there. There is certainly going to be terminology that is missing. And also, in the case of one word, I used the word bisex, which I just coined solely for this graph because basically I couldn't fit in a long sentence to describe someone who wants to present both male and female genitalia, but doesn't consider themselves as a pre-op trans male. I guess that's what it would be. I don't think it would work the other way, would it? Pre-op trans female, but I don't think it would work the other way. I'm not too sure. I have put the link in the description of this video to the Cross Dreamers glossary of transgender, non-binary and queer terms, which really goes into a lot of detail on some of the concepts around gender and sexual preferences and different terminology. I would thoroughly recommend looking at that as well. But I'm going to stop there. Otherwise, I'm going to hopelessly fail, if I've not already, in my attempt to try and offer a quick and simple picture of this amazingly complex thing, especially if you fall in the non-binary categories at least, of understanding our sexuality. Now, I actually went through and did my own assessment on this. I won't go into detail, but it gives you an idea of the sort of thing you might want to do yourself with get a highlighter pen out if you print this off, and just use these as prompts and see which ones are relevant for you. Might be useful, might actually lead to some thoughts, some questions that you might not have considered in any depth before. Take care. Bless you. And do remember the link for this infograph is in the description for the video.